And I realized that there's two groups that are mainly crapping on it. It's the econ twit and just general people who hate Bitcoin. They like to troll the crypto bros. So this is a great way to say, man, these are underwhelming. It sort of signals to the rest of econ they're cool. This has been fascinating because I'm just the guy who's been had his nose to the ETF grindstone for almost 20 years. And I've seen launch after launch. In fact, they come out so fast you miss them. In the past 6 weeks, there's been 120 ETF launches. We've only talked about 10 of them, but there's been 120. And most of them do nothing. I mean, they're like crickets. They're lucky to get $1 million in trading. So here come these. They trade 50 to 500 times the norm. Not percent increase, but times. And the people are unsatisfied. And I realized that there's two groups that are mainly crapping on it. It's the econ twit and just general people who hate Bitcoin. They like to troll the crypto bros. So this is a great way to say, man, these are underwhelming. It sort of signals to the rest of econ they're cool, and it basically trolls the crypto bros to going crazy. Oh my God, what did you mean it wasn't successful? When Moon crowd, they were thinking, oh my God, we're going to get this huge God candle or whatever, the God candle. And it kind of flattened, it went down a little bit. There was a sell the news kind of event. And they're all trying to investigate, wait a second, the GBTC outflows kind of match the inflows to the ETF. The other ones, there's no new net buying, and you're playing Sherlock Holmes. And they're frustrated because they wanted that bump. Two things on that. A, it went up 80% on the rumor or optimism of approval. You have to factor that into all this. You have a major perspective problem. I'm a 60-40 investor. I'm happy with 7% a year. So the idea that you could still be at 50% or something and be bitching and moaning is insane to me. So there's that kind of perspective. Now, every time there's a run-up, like when the Fed is supposed to lower rates, there's a run-up in the stock market before the Fed announcement. This is what happens in markets. There's a run-up before an expected outcome. So there's a sell the news event. Second, there's been a lot more buying in flows than there has been GBTC outflows. But the numbers and the volume is so dramatically off the charts and abnormal. I'm not really sure what planet people are from that it's not enough, or they thought it would be bigger. Certainly there was a lot of hype, and maybe it just underwhelmed compared to that, but that's a relative issue that I can't help them with. I can only go with reality and the past, the numbers. And this was top 0.1% ETF launch ever.
Can you put some numbers around that, Eric?
Sure. So we'll go by flows, right? And again, I separate out the newborn 9 because GBTC coming over and is a fully grown adult. GBTC is a separate entity. The newborn 9, which again, these are all first ever, have taken in $3 billion. They've traded about $6 billion. Those are crazy numbers. So the volume alone, that's $6 billion. That's multitudes more than all 500 ETFs launched last year traded combined, pick a day this week. They trade about maybe close to $1 billion, the 500 of them together. And these guys have done $6 billion of that. They're averaging more than the 500 combined base. So it's hard to do this in the first couple of days. And the other thing I'll mention, which I'm about to tweet out, the volume usually on these big hyped up launches, it starts high and it comes down 25% a day. And then you hope it settles into 70 million a day or something like that. You'd be happy with that. It went up today. So today, all of them are trading more than they did the day before. That is a really good sign. You never see that. That tells you there's legs here. It's not just some hype thing that fizzled away. There's people who are ETFs are the tail wagging the dog, and stock picking is over because all the stocks are in ETF. The flows in the ETF will make dispersion among stocks go away. Long story short, some of the ways we dispelled that was showing GE stock over the course of a year when bad earnings came out, it tanked. And then we showed the flows of ETFs that held it and index funds. And the flows could not do anything to stop the tanking. They were inflows coming in to buy GE. Now, would GE have gone down a little further? Probably. So I would argue in this kind of a scenario, if you have sell the news people, who are players who were hedge funds who bought GBTC, maybe wrote it up and they're selling, any kind of sell the news or GBTC selling, the flows into the newborns at least are making it less bad. Would be way worse if it weren't for the ETF flows that are net positive at about $1 billion. I was like talking to the crypto people. This is on you, buddy. Somebody in your world, I don't know who it is, some whale or just a bunch of degenerates, they're selling the news here. That's overwhelming the ETF inflows. So just like GE could fall despite ETF inflows and disprove the tail wagging the dog, these ETFs are not going to wag the dog either. There are many other elements going on. Over time, they should help, I would think. But one other point to make, the other whole thing, GBTC outflows, newborn 9 inflows. So even though the newborn 9 have taken in more than GBTC outflows, there definitely is some kind of an offsetting. And I don't know how many people are like refugees from GBTC who have found a home in one of the newborn 9. Let's call that 30% of the outflows. I think a lot of hedge funds game that discount and they're going somewhere else. They don't use ETFs a ton anyway. That said, ETFs are going to steal from everywhere. Like VU is the Vanguard 500, right? We track its flows. It's taken in $35 billion or $40 billion last year. Probably some of that came from mutual funds. And those outflows from mutual funds and the inflows to VU, they are net zero demand on stocks. But we still track VU inflows. If we tried to offset every flow that ETF stole, we'd go nuts. It's just, they steal from everywhere and that they will. Anything that's high cost is going to get some of its lunch stolen by the ETFs over time. But GBTC is like a great example. To me, it's playing the role of the high cost mutual fund in this little universe.